Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Eerie News, and today is January 7th, 2025, Tuesday, January 7th, 2025. Officially the first week into the new year. And even though it's a new year, it's always good to go to tried and true. Let's start with a story out of Stranger Than Fiction Stories, and it's titled The Cult of the Death Bat God. Belief in this deity started among the Mesoamericans of Guatemala, which was described as a dangerous cave-dwelling bat creature known as camazots. In the Maya culture, it is linked to death and inhabits a cave called the House of Bats and the Popol Vuh. This monster bat would attack victims and decapitate them. Camazots is identified as one of the four animal demons whose aim is destruction. His purpose, along with the other gods, was to clear the slate to create the perfect slaves on earth. Camazots is the fourth of the 9 lords of the night featured on the Mayan Hab calendar. Another version of bat-like monsters in Peru and Chile is called chonchon. It was supposed to have been created by a sorcerer or kaku, who through dark magic caused a severed head to sprout giant ears that became wings and talons, and it has fierce fangs like a jaguar. The kaku himself can become a chonchon by applying a magical ointment on his throat that allows for the separation of his head from the body. Once detached, the head becomes a chonchon. It flies around on moonless nights, committing evil acts and drink human blood, especially from those who are sick. The legend says that only another kaku can see a chonchon. Regular persons can only hear its cry of tui, tui, tui. Hearing it is a portent of impending doom or the death of a loved one. Some archaeologists suggest that the basis for these stories are encounters with real vampire bats and the inspiration for the bat god Camazots. This animal has a historical connection to bloodletting and sacrifice. The Zapotec were a pre-Columbian civilization that flourished in the valley of Huaca in southern Mexico. They built the ancient city of Montalban, and their mention of a bat-like deity dates back to 100 AD. Seen flying out of sacred cenotes or dark caves, they equated the bats with death. Mayans of Central America believed the bat was the guardian of the underworld and a powerful force against enemies. Camazots was a large leaf-nosed bat with a human-like form. He was usually depicted with a sacrificial knife in one hand and a human heart in the other. In the Popol Vuh, Camazots acted as a go-between. When the first men wanted to acquire fire from the underworld, mankind offered the bat god their armpits and waists in exchange for fire. This is believed to be the origin of the ritual of human sacrifice, which is why victims were cut open from the top to the bottom of their torso. Surprisingly, Madame L'Angle book A Wrinkle in Time, published in 1962, is a fantasy that describes a physicist's father who travels through space in the fifth dimension, and 3 children who, aided by supernatural beings, seek him on the planet Camazots. It's a place where puppet-like inhabitants are controlled by a disembodied brain. What an odd choice for a children's story when one can be sure that she understood the origins of the name. There was a real animal that existed during the Pleistocene age that was about 25% larger than modern vampire bats. Its name is Desmodus draculae, or giant vampire bat. It is the largest known vampire bat to have ever lived. Its extinction is assumed to be geologically recent, as some of its remains discovered were not yet fossilized. The latest age for fossils found for this giant bat have been dated to approximately 1650 AD, which leads to the belief that it coexisted with human beings in Central and South America. Recent sightings date back to 1947, when J. Harrison claimed to have seen large creatures he described as giant bats with wingspans of about 12 feet. In the early 1950s, a Brazilian couple claimed to see a giant bat as they walked in a forest of pelotas in the same area that fossils had been recovered. The couple, however, described the creatures as being humanoid in appearance. In the mid 1970s, different witnesses claimed to have seen a creature described as a bald bat, or pterosaur like with a short beak and gorilla like face. Three-toed prints were said to have been found at the place of one of the sightings. In 1965, giant bats were seen in northern Chihuahua, Mexico, with wingspreads of up to 3 feet. They were attacking people and cattle. In 1975, there was an outbreak of animal mutilations in the town of Moca in Puerto Rico. A farmer and others who lived in the area of the attacks described seeing two gray bird-like creatures. In 1988, a fossil of this bat was discovered in the Mongas province of Venezuela. Additional evidence has been found in the Yucatan Peninsula, Belize, northern Brazil, and Argentina. It is not known exactly when this Desmodus draculae went extinct, if at all. In 2021, paleontologists in Argentina found a fossilized jaw of the Desmodus draculae inside an ancient burrow of a giant sloth. Fossil evidence, strange stories, and native mythos points to the possibility that man and giant vampire bats cross paths many times. Were humans ever victims of an animal that lived from ingesting blood? Interesting. Yes, if you look at the representation that they made of the Camazots, its face is very similar to the as far as the nose and everything to the vampire bat. The way its nose is shaped and everything, yes. And of course, considering this whole bat god, I'm sure that they had the humans and vampire bats crossed. It was they crossed path, and they, just like they said, they would see it coming out of dark caves, and so they equated it with darkness, the underworld, and it became a dark god as far as their pantheon is concerned. Question is, do they ever still exist? I'm sure everybody's heard the stories of all these animals that supposedly went extinct but are still around. I'm talking about not dinosaurs, but later time periods. You know, you hear people saying, oh, there's dire wolves out there. In the oceans, the megalodons are still alive. So I guess this is this is another version of, is there still giant vampire bats in existence somewhere in South and Central America? Okay, next story is out of Stranger Than Fiction Stories, and it's titled Crime on the Cariboo. Historically, whenever gold is discovered, it's rapidly followed by a swell of strangers, all vying to strike it rich. When it comes, opportunity, but also trouble, and even murder follow immediately. In 1862, by the way, this area of the Cariboo is in British Columbia. In 1862, Nehemiah T. Smith, better known as Blackjack, was involved in the discovery of gold in the Cariboo mines and the famous strike on William Creek. He had been part of the Fraser River Gold Rush in 1858. Along the 385 miles of the Cariboo Road, a continual stream of humanity poured in, composed of miners, drovers bringing in herds of cattle, and long trains of pack mules. Entrepreneurs and those suffering from gold fever descended on the area. One of them was William Roper, who in 1863 bought 320 acres, and within 4 years he built a stopping house or post house named the 108 Mile House. For an unknown reason, he left in 1871 and moved to Cherry Creek. In 1875, legend goes that 108 Mile House was owned by a certain Scottish woman named Agnes McVie, who had fled her native land to escape charges of murder. She ran the inn with her husband Jim and her brother-in-law Al Riley. The trio operated the hotel along with serving meals in a brothel. Then one day, opportunity came knocking in the form of Henry Dawson. After eating a meal, he told Agnes he wanted to buy one of her girls, since he was settling down and needed a wife. Whether he had won too many drinks or was just plain stupid, He told Agnes he carried with him about $11,000 in gold dust and nuggets. Agnes put him off, telling him she needed to speak to her husband about the deal. The story goes he was shot in the back while eating supper, or he was ambushed after he left the inn. His body was disposed of in a nearby lake. In the next 5 years, over 50 men were killed. Those selected were traveling alone and made mention of returning from the goldfields. Agnes's group made a small fortune from robbing and killing miners, and the brothel where it was rumored the girls were chained. It turned out that one day Agnes fell in love with a traveling miner named Jim MacDonald, who, like others before him, came to purchase a girl from the girls working for Agnes. Despite Agnes's admonition to her husband not to kill MacDonald, he did so, but worst of all, his new would-be bride was able to escape. Agnes retaliated against her husband by poisoning him. In the meantime, the escaped girl told authorities of what happened, and also that young women were kept in prison. Agnes Miss V was taken to Fort Kamloops with her brother-in-law, and in some instances he's referred to as her son-in-law, who confessed to all their deeds. Agnes committed suicide since she knew she was headed for a necktie party. Al Riley did swing, and authorities recovered 49 bodies and skeletons in lakes north of the 108 mile. They also found bones and teeth in some of the fireplaces. Through the years, rumors spread that Agnes buried gold on the property, and in 1924 a rancher dug up a cache of $2,500 near where the hotel once stood. In later years, $6,000 in gold coins and nuggets were unearthed by a machine operator clearing the site for the 108-mile airstrip. Even tainted with its murderous history, the 108 mile was bought by William Walker. In 1885, he hit a vein of silver quartz 61 miles above Clinton near 108 Mile House on the Cariboo Wagon Road. He then sold the inn to Steve Tingley, a BX stagecoach driver and owner of the BC Express Company, who ran it with his son Clarence. By 1890, Tingley had purchased an additional 640 acres. In 1892, the hotel was torn down and built across the road. In 1903, Captain Jeffrey Launcelot Watson became the owner. Watson was a veteran from the Boer Wars, and being connected to the Watson Scotch whiskey distillery, he was wealthy enough to acquire 50,000 acres in the area. In the meantime, he closed the inn and in 1904 started building a new home at Watson Lake, about 4 miles away. He poured money into the house, installing Italian marble, embossed wallpaper, and rich wood paneling. This was in preparation to receive his fiancée from England. The house was finished in 1911. However, by then the young woman heard stories of the murderous Indians attacking settlers and decided the wilds of British Columbia were not for her. Captain Watson stayed living in the Cariboo and operated it as a ranch. He went on to build a huge barn to house his Highland cattle and Clydesdale horses, which he imported and bred. He also acted as a justice of the peace for the province of British Columbia. By all accounts, he was a kind and generous man, well liked and respected by all, and always willing to help those in need. At the onset of World War I, he returned to England. On April 20th, 1915, during the heavy fight to take Hill 60 on the Western Front near Ypres, Belgium, he was killed in action. He was 35 years old. In the 1917 Year's Honor, he was mentioned as Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Watson, CB, attached Canadian Headquarters, receiving a Companion of the Order of the Bath honor. Without a master, the house sat vacant and was vandalized. It was restored in 1979 as a youth camp, and it burned down in 1983 after a chimney fire broke out. It spread quickly to the rest of the building. Within hours, the entire manor was reduced to ashes. The 108 property was purchased by Lord Egerton in 1915 and incorporated into his existing Highland ranch. All of these cast of characters were real, except for the murderess Agnes McVie. There is no reference to her in the historical records, or even a mention of her capture, and the discovery of the miners she had killed through a 5-year tenure of the 108 house. However, that doesn't mean that miners were not murdered in order to rob them. Such was the case of one C.M. Blessing. The C.M. stands for Charles Morgan. On October 11th, 1866, a murder at Beaver Pass, Cariboo, made the newspapers. A pack train driver fired a shot at a grouse where the old trail left the highway. The bird fell among the trees on the hillside. Looking for the grouse, he stumbled over the body of a man. It was huddled against the log. The clothes on the skeleton were undisturbed. He was dressed in a double black-breasted vest, blue serge pants with drawers, a gray undershirt, and a heavy grayish-brown overshirt, a small white neckerchief, a pair of heavy-nailed Wellington boots size 8. A belt was lying by his side with a brass hook and eye. There was no hat. His teeth were perfect on both jaws, some of them filled with gold. However, a bullet hole was clearly visible on the back of the skull, leaving no doubt he was murdered. Inside the dead man's pockets was a silver hunting case watch, maker's name John Tobias from Liverpool, a silver pencil case bearing on the seal the initials CMB, a new tin drinking cup with the name of CM Blessing scratched on the bottom. A sheath knife was found at his feet, and the handle had the initials CMB carved into it. In another pocket was a small clasp purse containing a few grains of fine gold wrapped up in a piece of tea paper. One of the pockets of his pants was turned inside out. The coroner's jury returned a verdict of willful murder against some person or persons unknown. Within a few days of the discovery of the remains, James Barry, a passenger on the downstage, was arrested on the charge of the murder. It seems a telegram was received from the magistrate at Quesnel. Barry was described as an Irishman by birth, but had been several years in the country and was well known in New Westminster and Cariboo, and of an unreproachable character. He had spent 3 or 4 seasons at Cariboo, but without any luck. When arrested, he carried no money on his person, and a friend had paid his passage on the stage. On August 12, 1867, Judge Matthew Bailey Begbie pronounced a death sentence on 2 men who were tried for murdering minors. James Barry and a Siwash named Nicol Palsk were hanged from the same scaffolding at Richfield. A few months after Blessing's death, John Morgan, a miner heading out from Cariboo, was murdered by Palsk 7 miles below Soda Creek. He was caught after trying to sell Morgan's watch for $5.50. An Indian accomplice sealed his fate by turning Queen's evidence. Blessing's murder was more complicated. It seemed he had come to Cariboo after mining in California. Along the way, he fell in with a black barber by the name of Wellington D. Moses, who ran a barber shop on Williams Creek for a few years. He was also the inventor of Moses' hair invigorator to, quote, prevent baldness, relieve headache, and give the hair a darker glossy color. He claimed it would grow hair on the head of a bald senator. Moses was born in the West Indies and married Rebecca Montgomery in Liverpool, England in 1841. He served as a merchant Navy seaman for Britain from 1845 to 1854. How he ended up as a barber in British Columbia is a story lost to time. The men walked along for several days from Yale to Quesnel, which was a distance of more than 300 miles, until they reached Quesnel Mouth. Moses told Blessing he would stay a few days to work on men who needed a shave and a haircut before leaving for Barkerville. Blessing told him he would look for someone heading to Williams Creek, and if not, he would go on alone. A day later, he told Moses he had found a man who was going to Cariboo, which was Barkerville, and his name was Barry. Moses supposedly told him not to leave with Barry, who he said didn't have a friend on the creek, and instead go with him. Blessing didn't take him up on the offer since he was anxious to arrive at the goldfield. A week later, Moses came upon Barry in Barkerville and asked what had become of Blessing. Barry said he had gone over to Antler Creek. Moses was suspicious and decided to keep an eye on Barry, but that's all he had, suspicion. In truth, he didn't want to go missing like his friend C.M. Blessing. A few weeks later, a dance hall girl from Camerontown came to have her hair bobbed. When paying Moses, she pulled out a peculiarly shaped nugget out of her purse. It was shaped like an angel with outspread wings. Moses immediately recognized it as Blessing's good luck piece. He called it his guardian angel. He knew the man would never have parted with it. When he asked the girl about it, she said that Barry had given it to her, insinuating they had a close relationship. She didn't have to insinuate anything, says Moses, as a town barber knew all the gossip. The months passed, and still there was no sign of blessing. Barry, who worked at the Pioneer Mine, came to town frequently. Then in October 1866, a story was printed about a man's body being found at Pine Grove. His belongings indicate his name was C.M. Blessing. Moses read the story, and so did Barry, who caught a southbound stage for Yale the same night. A warrant was made out against Barry, based on information provided by Moses. He would go on to be the star witness, and he identified the nugget. He also verified the watch and other trinkets as belonging to Blessing. At the trial, a man named Gannon testified he had met Barry and Blessing on the way to Pine Grove, and when Barry returned, he was alone. Barry never admitted to the crime, but it was believed that he knew Blessing carried a little money and killed him in order to rob him. It would be easy to hide the body, and since he was a stranger, no one would miss him. Wellington Moses never left Barkerville and died in 1890 at the age of 74. In 1973, the government established a 1.2-acre Class A park on the road to Barkerville in memory of Blessing, who was 30 years old when he was killed. So practically, this poor man was murdered, for a nugget which he ended up giving to a saloon girl. All right, what they call hurdy-gurdy girls. And nothing. And by the time that, because it took a few months for the body to be discovered, luckily, because otherwise he would have gotten away with murder. By the time the body was discovered, he didn't have any money on him. So basically, he killed a man in cold blood, shot him in the head over nothing, very little money. Obviously, this man was out there, to mine gold, but yes, those miners, it was a very difficult job, not only physically, but when you went out there, there was a lot of different types of men, because there was especially men that was working those mines, and miners got killed for stuff like that, for claim jumping, and that's why you hear about, a lot of these miners were very secretive about wanting to work alone, or they only took one person with them because they were always afraid that somebody was going to come and do something against them, or stuff like that. So yeah, and everybody was always watching so and so, like, did this person come in? Did they seem happy? Did they have a lot of money? Did they strike it? So yeah, that's why miners have that reputation. Okay, also out of Stranger Than Fiction stories, this is the Detroit axe murder. Near the corner of St. Aubin Street and Mack in Detroit is a tract of land where a house once stood. In 1929, a horrific murder was committed under its roof, where a family, including 4 children, were killed. Not surprisingly, there have been reports of a headless man seen wandering where this abode once stood. Could it be the fact that this murder was never solved that causes a tortured soul to be bound to the place and experience its last horrific moments as a human being? In 1902, 15-year-old Benjamino Evangelista was only one of a million of Italian immigrants who came to America seeking a better life. He anglicized his name to Benny Evangelist, moved to Philadelphia, and set about making a life for himself with his older brother Antonio, who had immigrated from Naples with him. The brothers prospered, but during this time Benny developed an interest in the occult and claimed to be receiving visions from God, many which were quite dark and not Catholic at all. He also started his cult, which was probably the sale of love potions and hexes to those who were lovelorn or wanted vengeance. Whether his brother Antonio already had seen this side of his brother is unknown, but it was enough to sever the relationship, and Antonio disowned him, at least temporarily, and Benny went off to York, Pennsylvania to work on the railroad there. Like magnet to steel, Benny developed a friendship with another Neapolitan named Aurelius or Leon Angelino. Perhaps he was seeking a mentor or father figure, since Angelino was 20 years his senior, and before long, they both continued studying occult philosophy such as theosophy, among others. Benny continued with the development of his cult and its philosophies, but a horrific event occurred which derailed the fruition of his plans. Whether they fed each other's insanity, or there was a triggering event which sent Angelino over the edge in May 1919, he was jailed and transferred to the county asylum. His wife made efforts and secured his release, not realizing what a horrendous mistake this would turn out to be. The following day, while his wife prepared dinner in their Lancaster home, he took up a club and tried to kill her. She ran into the yard with two of their four children. However, he took the opportunity to lock himself in the room where his 4-year-old twin sons were sleeping and crushed their skulls with a club. He then stripped nude, took their bodies to the yard, chopped up one, and stuffed the body parts in a can. And he was stopped by police before he could dismember the second. He ended up in the hospital for the criminally insane. Benny Evangelista, whether truly disturbed by what his friend had done, or because he thought it was expedient to sever all ties between himself and his ghastly crime, relocated to Detroit, Michigan. He moved in with his brother Tony, who lived in an Italian neighborhood at 642 Wilkins Street, with his wife and 4 children. Benny worked as a carpenter. Sometime after 1920, Benny married Santina Zenopia, had his own children, and expanded his interest into real estate. Despite making quite a bit of money with his real estate interest, there is no denying that he was enthralled with the occult. He named the cult the Union Federation of America, and authored his own Bible for its titled The Oldest History of the World Discovered by Occult Science. He was a self-described prophet, mystic, and healer, and used religion, black magic, and herbal medicine to cure those with mental or physical ailments. He would charge sometimes as much as $10, which was the equivalent of 2 days' pay for most of the people that lived in his neighborhood. Things went so well for Benny that he moved his family to a house at 3587 St. Albans Street in Detroit. It was spacious, painted green, and had a wide porch. In the basement, he had constructed a dingy shrine that consisted of papier-mâché dolls. There were figures hanging by a wire in the ceiling, which he claimed depicted celestial planets, and his Bible was the sun. He also had an altar where he concocted his potions and hexes, including the sacrifice of animals. He held sermons there as well as readings, but not all those that came to him for cures or love potions were pleased with the results. There were those who thought Benny Evangelista had duped them and taken their money. It was believed Evangelista's cult was one of witchcraft and evil woven about the ancient symbols of black magic. Ironically, he raised his children as Roman Catholics, leading the police to conclude he was a charlatan who concocted his shrine in order to make money. On July 3rd, 1929, a real estate agent named Vincent Elias came to the Evangelista home. He was there to wrap up the deal with Benny for the purchase of a farm near Marine City, Michigan. He thought it was very strange that the household appeared to be so quiet. The front door was unlocked, and he thought that Benny was downstairs in his basement, and he let himself in. He found Benny there all right, with his arms across his chest, sitting in a chair behind his desk, minus his head, which had been placed next to his feet. He bolted from the house and summoned neighbors and the police. When they entered, they found a house of horror. Benny, it appeared, had been the first victim, and bloody footprints were tracked upstairs where the bodies of Santina and her 4 children were found in their bedclothes. The coroner estimated the crime was committed around midnight. Santina's head had been almost severed, and her 18-month-old son Mario lay in her arms with his head crushed in. Angeline 7, Margaret 5, Jean 3 had their heads crushed in as well, but one of them had a partially amputated arm at the shoulder. As the Detroit Press quoted, insofar as is known, nothing of any value such as money, jewelry, or papers was disturbed, although Evangelist had the reputation of being a considerably well-to-do real estate operator among the Italian colony on the east side. Excuse me. which kind of points in the direction that this robbery was not a motive. Among the weird idols that Evangelista had on the altar, he had well-known Catholic icons, including a cross. He also had a false beard and wig, which the police believed he used when giving his readings. There were also 3 pictures of a child laying in a coffin, which later on the police found out to be of Benny's son Malio, who died in 1924. There was no explanation as to what message the photographs were intended to convey. The police interviewed his physician, which lived also on St. Albans Street. He told them that Benny was insane and a religious fanatic. He would demonstrate outside his home on the street, waving his arms around and shouting incantations while he stared heavenward. The doctor said that the older children were Mrs. Evangelist by a former marriage, as they had not been married that long. It's unknown if these were other children that did not live with them since they had married in 1921 when she was 29 years old. Next, the police interviewed his attorney, who told them that he had been involved in several lawsuits on behalf of Benny Evangelista about real estate transactions, but none that would have caused such a level of enmity to cause the massacre of an entire family. Several pieces of women's undergarments, each tagged with the name of its owners, police point out, reveal that the so-called mystic indulged in practices of voodooism or devil worship. Such garments, voodooism has it, can lead to the finding of a missing person when they are properly handled by one who's versed in the mystic arts of that belief. This is what the newspapers were writing when the crime happened, and it wasn't just the murder of an entire family. It was what was found in that basement. Then it goes on. The police had their hands full, as not only neighbors but other gawkers came to see the house where the crime took place, contaminating the grounds and destroying any clues. They were lucky to recover a bloody fingerprint from the front doorknob. When the detectives started to canvass the neighborhood for more information, they ran into another problem, which was that most of the families living there were recent Sicilian and Italian immigrants who did not want to talk about what they knew, if anything at all. Despite the proof found at the evangelist home that Benny had received hundreds of people for a reading, not even a handful admitted to even knowing him. One of the leads the police found were several notes Benny had kept, in which he was being threatened by the Black Hand, the last one only being written 6 months before. They had a reputation of preying on wealthy Italian immigrants, but that theory led nowhere. By 1929, the Black Hand had evolved into organized crime and were not extorting local businessmen, a practice that was common before the time of Prohibition. Benny would probably not have taken the threat seriously, correctly assuming it was an amateur trying to scare him. The following day, police arrested Umberto Tecchio and Angelo De Poli. Tecchio had visited the evangelist home the day before the murder to make the final payment on a house he had bought from Benny. De Poli had accompanied him to the house. When the police visited that boarding house where they lived, they found a keen-edged banana knife and work boots that had just been washed. Both men denied any involvement with the murder and claimed they had gone off to drink after visiting the house. The police were slow to accept their words as truth, since Tecchio had escaped prosecution after knifing his brother-in-law, Bart Maffro, in April. He claimed that it was self-defense, and since Maffro had later died at the hospital, there was no one to contradict his version of the story. But with no further proof to tie them to the murder, they were both freed. Tecchio was arrested for the murder in March of 1932, based on new evidence, and then freed when they verified that his fingerprint did not match the one found at the murder scene. The police ultimately pinned the murder posthumously on him in August of 1935. Tecchio had died November 1934 from a hemorrhage. His wife, who had divorced him after he had killed her brother, told police that Benny Evangelist had 2 machetes hanging over his altar, one which was not found and believed to be the murder weapon. A newspaper boy said that he had seen Tecchio at 5 a.m. on the doorstep of the evangelist's home when he was delivering papers, and others who lived in the same boarding home as him were not sure if he had left later that night. None of these witnesses had dared to come forward while he was alive. However, the resolution to the case was short-lived when, in August 1935, the fingerprint taken at the scene was sent to another police department who confirmed that it did not belong to Tecchio. After the murder, police received an anonymous phone call detailing Evangelist's past, that he was alleged to have practiced hexing while living in York, Pennsylvania, which led to a murder near York. It's unknown if this alluded to the Angelino murders. His relatives refused to discuss his cult, and none of his customers admitting to trying his magic. The murder threw the city and especially the Italian community into a panic. Evangelist relatives and neighbors fled the city. Neighbors went to Pittsburgh looking for Benny's cousin, Louis Evangelist, with his father-in-law, Angelo Paparo, who fled from Detroit 3 years before. This was a few days after Paparo shot and killed Felice Argento, a reputed Black Hand extortionist, when Argento came to collect $5,000 by threats. Police stopped them out believing they had information about the cult leader's life that might help them, including the suspicion the crime might have ties to a vendetta. Florence Morris came to the police station on July 6 to request protection for her children from some imaginary danger she felt might befall them. Eventually, they called her husband to take her home. 3 hours later, she went downtown and jumped to her death from the 23rd story of the Barium Towers. She was 36 years old and the mother of 5 children. Her husband described where she had read every story written about the Evangelista murder and somehow thought the same could befall her own family. No connection was found between her and the Evangelistas. The last suspect, Aurelius Leon Angelino, in hindsight was probably the most accurate based on the nature of the crime. About a year after the murder, a comparison was made between the fingerprint at the Evangelist's crime scene and those taken from the Angelino household when his sons were killed, and they appeared to match. In 1923, Angelino had escaped from the Pennsylvania Asylum for the Criminally Insane and was never found again. He had escaped twice before and had been recovered. Had he made his way to Detroit, ready to establish their business relationship, only to be rebuffed by Evangelist, who had no interest in sharing the spotlight or the money he was making? Did he make his way into the home, when he knew the residents of the working-class neighborhood would be asleep in their homes, and slip out to leave the city quickly, knowing there would be many that would be suspected? After his escape in 1923, nothing was ever known of the whereabouts of Angelino. In the 1940s, the Evangelista home was demolished, and now most of the neighborhood built in the 1920s has been leveled as well. Only a grassy field remains on the site of this horrific murder, which is said to be haunted by the figure of a headless man. Perhaps this was the bargain he made with the dark forces that he worshipped in his basement shrine. The one eyewitness to the bloody crime disappeared for 9 months. In March 1930, the Evangelista's dog, described as a shaggy brown mongrel, which belonged to the children, disappeared the day of the murder. Police made a record of the dog's license number, and a woman reported that a dog with a 1929 license number had come to her home. When she learned who had owned the animal, she decided not to adopt it. Almost 61 years to the day of the Evangelista massacre, another crime with ritualistic overtones occurred. It all started when a skinned human head was found in a freezer inside a plastic bag. It belonged to Stephanie Dubé, age 15, who had run away from home after her mother refused to let her get a rose tattoo. The rest of her was found in 5 trash bags. 4 were buried in the yard, and 1 was found in the garage of a brick house on Jean Street in Warren, Michigan. The house was already under police surveillance for drug activity. Stephanie's killers turned out to be Jamie Rodriguez Jr., 22, and his cousin Agustin Peña, 16. Rodriguez was no stranger to breaking the law. He had served time for trying to set fire to an inhabited house, and he kidnapped a 16-year-old girl from Saginaw. Peña carried a knife, marijuana, and a complete book of witchcraft. Both of them killed Dubé together. They stabbed her 10 times, and her right index finger was cut off so it could be worn on a necklace as part of a religious observance on August 1st, Lammas Day, which also happened to be Rodriguez's 22nd birthday. Rodriguez had a tattoo inscribed with 666, and his victim would also end up tattooing herself with the same numbers on her chest. The crime was discovered when Rodriguez called the girl to come over. He opened the freezer door and showed her Stephanie's head, which he recognized from the blue eyes. He offered to give her the eyes. She ran out the door. She returned with a friend, and they took the head to the police station. I wonder what he expected that she was going to do. I was like, hey, look what I got in here. And, you know, it's surprising. You know, here's 60 years almost to the date. Another gruesome, with these occult overtones. And then what's I think is disturbing is that both of these, or well, the two and the other one, they all were displaying symptoms of insanity or mental instability. I'm not talking eccentric or peculiar. I'm talking like dangerous. All right, and they nothing happened. It was all good until they killed somebody. And I believe the other two, they got life in prison. And this gentleman, same thing. I think probably it was that guy Angelino, the one that killed his two sons. And that's, there's the crazy guy, and then there's always somebody that's crazier than you. Again, they're crazy or psychopathic or God knows what. But maybe he did come and said, hey, you're doing great here. You got a family. You got a real estate business going on. Plus, you got all these, this little altar and religion and cult. Let me in. We were once tight. And maybe by then, before he was a single guy, he didn't need a mentor anymore. He told him, nah, thanks, but no thanks. And then he forgot that that guy was crazier than him. Okay. I'm sorry. Next story is out of Zero Hedge, and it's titled Classified CIA Experiment Claims Life Did Exist on Mars and They Built Pyramids. Yahoo. All right, Elon. Here we go. Imagine unlocking a door in your mind and stepping into a barren, windswept landscape. Alien skies above, ancient pyramids towering in the distance, and whispers of a civilization long gone. This might sound like the plot of a science fiction novel, but it's exactly what unfolded in a classified CIA experiment during the height of the Cold War. One such session led to through a top-secret program known as the Stargate Project. Intelligence officers turned to psychics in hopes of gaining access to inaccessible places. One such session led to an astonishing revelation. Descriptions of life on Mars over 1 million years ago, complete with advanced beings and monumental structures. Could these accounts hold the key to understanding our own planet's mysteries? Or were they simply the product of an overactive imagination? As the once classified files are revealed to the public, they reignite questions humanity has been asking for centuries. Are we alone? And if not, how much of our history is truly ours? At the height of the Cold War, espionage wasn't limited to gadgets, codes, and spies. The United States was racing not only against its earthly adversaries, but also against the boundaries of human consciousness. Into the Stargate Project, a CIA-backed program exploring the potential of remote viewing, a technique where individuals claim to mentally perceive events, locations, or objects from great distances without physical presence. Remote viewing refers to a type of extrasensorial perception that involves using the mind to see or manipulate distant objects, people, events, or other information that are hidden from physical view. It explains that this practice was more than just speculation. It was part of a serious effort to harness the untapped potential of the human mind for intelligence purposes. This wasn't a fringe experiment by secretive hobbyists. It was a government-funded initiative blending espionage with the supernatural. Participants, often labeled as psychics or gifted individuals, were tasked with extraordinary missions, seeing inside secure facilities, locating hidden objects, and even uncovering secrets from other planets. The project aimed to turn thought into a weapon, hoping to outpace the Soviet Union in a battle for the mind. In 1984, one such experiment took a surprising turn. A remote viewer, given the coordinates with no prior context, described visions that defied explanation. The focus, Mars. The timeline, over 1 million years ago. What followed was a vivid account of a planet that seemed alive, filled with monumental structures and intelligent beings. Was this the breakthrough the CIA hoped for, or the limits of human imagination? The story of what they found, or claimed to find, on Mars would challenge conventional thinking for decades to come. In the dimly lit room of a classified CIA facility, a remote viewer sat silently, focusing on a set of coordinates provided by their handler. They were given no information about the location or purpose of the session. As they concentrated, an extraordinary vision unfolded, one that seemed to transcend time and space. The remote viewer described a desolate Mars, not as it is today, but as it might have been for over 1 million years ago. Towering dust storms raged across the surface, but the landscape was marked by massive pyramid-like structures, crumbling yet majestic, speaking of a once great civilization. The viewer spoke of intelligent beings, tall and thin, struggling to survive in the aftermath of a cataclysmic event that had ravaged their planet. These Martian inhabitants were described as desperate, searching for a way to escape their doomed world. Some had reportedly ventured to safe places, leaving behind their architectural marvels as monuments to their existence. The vividness of these accounts captivated the CIA officers present, raising questions that extended far beyond intelligence gathering. Were these glimpses a window into a forgotten past, or simply the creative workings of the human subconscious? What made this session particularly remarkable was the level of detail. The remote viewer described the structures, the atmospheric conditions, and even the emotional state of the beings with uncanny specificity. But these revelations would spark debates, leaving many to wonder whether such visions were rooted in truth or the imitations of an experiment that strayed into the realm of the extraordinary. Among the most captivating details from the 1984 session was a description of massive pyramid-like structures scattered across the Martian surface. These were not crude formations shaped by nature, but according to the remote viewer, deliberate constructions, evidence of a once thriving civilization. The pyramids, though weathered and ancient, were described as bearing a striking resemblance to those found on Earth, particularly in their geometric position and imposing scale. The idea of pyramids on Mars isn't new. It has long fueled theories about ancient astronauts and interplanetary connections. Could these structures be linked to the pyramids on Earth? Some speculate that civilizations across the cosmos shared advanced knowledge, leaving behind similar architectural legacies. Others suggest that Earth's ancient structure were inspired or even influenced by visitors from Mars, their knowledge passed down through myths and legends. However, skepticism tempers such tantalizing ideas. Geologists and planetary scientists argue that what appear to be pyramids could easily be natural formations, shaped by erosion over eons. Yet, the specificity of the remote viewer's descriptions challenges this dismissal. The pyramids were said to be part of a larger structural environment, a city or complex left in ruins after a catastrophic event. If these claims hold even a shred of truth, the implications are profound. Did an advanced civilization once thrive on Mars? Were they capable of space travel? And could they have influenced Earth's early cultures? Or are these visions simply a mirror of humanity's own longing to connect with the cosmos? As the mystery deepens, the pyramids on Mars stand as a symbolic bridge between what we know and what we may never understand. Some believe the timing is strategic, coinciding with growing public interest in UFOs and the search for alien life. Recent government disclosure on unidentified aerial phenomena (UAPs) have sparked a wave of curiosity and speculation. By releasing documents from projects like Stargate, the CIA may be acknowledging the public's demand for transparency about the unknown. Others suggest a more pragmatic motive. The files may serve as a historical record of Cold War era innovation and the unconventional methods pursued in the quest for an edge over adversaries. Projects like Stargate symbolize the lengths intelligence agencies were willing to go, even if the results were inconclusive or scientifically questionable. Regardless of intent, the release of these files has reignited interest in the boundaries of what we consider possible. As new generations discover these accounts, they're confronted with the question of how much we truly know about our universe and how much remains hidden in the archives of history. The timing of the declassification is also significant in the context of space exploration. With missions like NASA's Perseverance rover uncovering new data about Mars and private companies pushing the limits of human space travel, the mysteries of the red planet feel closer than ever. Perhaps these revelations serve as a reminder that the answers to our greatest questions may be found in the unlikeliest places. At the heart of the Mars experiment lies a question that transcends scientific skepticism or government secrecy. What does it mean if life once existed beyond Mars? Whether viewed as a glimpse into an ancient civilization or as an imaginative projection of the human mind, the claims invite us to reconsider humanity's place in the cosmos. For centuries, we have gazed at the stars searching for connections to something greater. The possibility that Mars once harbored intelligent life stirs both excitement and existential unease. If civilizations on other planets rose and fell, what lessons might their histories hold for us? Could their demise foreshadow humanity's own challenge in preserving its world? The 1984 session, while controversial, also highlights the power of the human imagination and its ability to explore realms far beyond our physical limitations. It bridges the gap between hard science and the metaphysical, offering a unique lens through which to view our universe. Ultimately, these revelations are a testament to our unending curiosity and our relentless pursuit of answers to the unknown. Whether or not pyramids and civilizations once dotted the Martian landscape, the story challenges us to keep asking, exploring, and imagining. After all, the search for life beyond Earth isn't just about what we might find. It's about what the journey reveals about ourselves. The declassified CIA experiment that claimed to uncover a glimpse of life on ancient Mars is as compelling as it is divisive. From towering pyramids to civilizations grappling with survival, the remote viewing session from the Stargate project bridges the line between science fiction and the tantalizing possibility of alien histories. While skeptics challenge the legitimacy of such accounts, the sheer detail and imagination behind them leave room for reflection. Could these stories hint at something larger, an interconnectedness across time and space, or are they a testament to the creativity and curiosity of the human mind? As we continue to explore Mars through rovers and satellites, the allure of these ancient claims lingers, reminding us that the universe holds countless mysteries waiting to be uncovered. Whether through scientific discovery or the power of human wonder, the answers we seek may one day reveal themselves, or they may remain forever in the realm of the unknown. Until then, Mars continues to inspire dreams, debates, and the age-old question, what if? And there we go. Very interesting. Because as I said, they're releasing so much new information now about, I don't call them UAPs, I call them UFOs, because that's really what I think of them as. UFOs, and of course, recently, we've had this mystery about the drones flying around New Jersey, which, as of right now, nobody's come up with a definite answer as from where, what, none of that. That's another one. It's like, why worry about Mars? We've got drones flying over New Jersey that we still don't know anything about them, besides the fact that people are wigged out with good reason, right? With good reason, because they're flying over residential areas. So yeah, I mean, forget the Mars thing. So again, it's one of these things. They release this information about something that happened, what, 40 years ago? But we can't get an answer about something that's imminent, like that's right there. So there you go. I'm telling you, it's a weird, weird world. 40 years ago and even now. Maybe by the next time, or hopefully soon, I will fill you guys in if they ever give an answer as to what, who, what, where about those drones. But until next time, stay weird.